Charles's mother died when he was only 13, and his father died when Charles was 20.
This is actually England's oldest community centre.
And it was on these lawns that the abolition of slavery was drafted. Could have been enough to turn him into a bitter and greedy man.
Hey me old mucker, how you been? And welcome to A Thing of the Past. Today, we're delving into the life of a social reformer whose ability to show the huge amount of reasons why people fell into poverty, not just statistically, but descriptively and visually, evolved social research in the 19th century into a force that could shape government policy and bring about much needed welfare reform. On a local level, in Frankston, his philanthropy gave the community a place to become a tight-knit group, and his name, Charles Booth, would be known to the present day. We hope you enjoy this episode.
Charles Booth was born on the 30th of March 1840 to Charles Booth and Emily Fletcher. He attended the Royal Institution School in Liverpool and was apprenticed into the family business at the age of 16.
Charles's mother died when he was only 13, and his father died when Charles was 20. Along with his brother Alfred, he took control of the family business. Were it not for the wealth and stability of the family at this point, Charles's future could have been very different, and this is something that he would carry with him. After the sudden death of his girlfriend at 22 years old, Charles and his brother set up in the leather trade and established a successful shipping firm together, building a harbour at what would become the Brazilian city of Manaus. It was during this time in business that he would develop many of the methods he would use later in social investigation. We're now going to visit Rothley Temple to discuss some of the influences that affected Charles's outlook on life.
Charles's father was a wealthy shipbuilder, corn merchant, and a prominent Unitarian. Unitarianism was a form of high-minded, rationalistic, nonconformist Christianity that believed in one God instead of the Trinity. Unitarianism had come in response to non-Anglicans not being allowed into commerce and other forms of business. Charles would actually reject his religion. However, he would be interested in religion and its impact on society for the rest of his life.
In 1871, he married Mary Macaulay, niece of eminent Victorian politician and historian Thomas Babington Macaulay. Babington Macaulay was heavily involved in the bringing about of the Reform Act of 1832. This effectively doubled the electorate. However, it meant that still only 18% of the male population were allowed to vote at the time. He then became involved in the governing of India. He was the first law member of the Governor-General's Council and served on the Supreme Council between 1834 and 1838. His view of India by modern-day standards, however, was less than progressive. I'm here on the lawn at Rothley Temple, once owned by the Knights Templar, and it was on these lawns that the abolition of slavery was drafted by William Wilberforce and Thomas Babington.
Charles had married into the social elite. His wife was a highly intelligent lady who helped him in his business and in his social work. They were friends with Octavia Hill and Beatrice Webb, and the ideas of reform and change spread throughout their friendship group. Charles would be inspired and would go on to make his greatest work, the poverty maps of London.
At the age of 46, Charles's connection with our local area began, as he and his family started renting Gracestew Manor from the Delisle Phillips family in 1886. We are heading there now to discuss Charles's major undertaking that would dominate the next 30 years of his life.
In 1885, Henry Hindman, leader of the Social Democratic Party, published an article in the Pall Mall Gazette stating that 25% of Londoners lived in poverty. Booth thought that this figure was vastly overstated, and with his interests in positivism and Comte, decided to carry out his own research. He employed a team of researchers to cover all areas of London, and they went from house to house asking families about work, pastimes and religion. With the findings, here at Grace Dew Manor behind me, Booth put the figures together and wrote the book The Life and Labour of the People of London. This work was groundbreaking. Its look into the social lives, rather than just using the census, meant that a greater picture of why people fell into poverty was developed.
Booth and his wife Mary would work on his book for over 20 years, revisiting it and enlarging it between 1889 and 1903. The final edition of Life and Labour of the People in London came to a whopping 17 volumes. With his knowledge of poverty, Booth set out to make a difference via legislation. In 1893, Booth served on the Royal Commission on the Aged Poor, and in 1899 published Old Age Pensions and the Aged Poor, a proposal, which set out his thoughts on state pension provision. It would however take another 9 years for his ideas to reach the statute book, when the Liberal Party passed the Old Age Pensions Act in 1908. Even then, Booth's recommendations were not fully adopted, with pensions set to be means-tested rather than universal, with universal pensions not coming into effect until 1946.
We're now here at Brixton House Club, now known as the Charles Booth Centre. This is actually England's oldest community centre, and it was donated along with the surrounding land by Charles and Mary in 1903. The house had a billiards room. Upstairs it had a sprung dance floor, and it also had a large stage for community productions that had all proper theatre lighting.
Despite his overall progressiveness, unfortunately Booth's views on London's Jewish population were anti-Semitic. His 1902 study including anti-Semitic references to the impact of Jewish immigration, comparing it to the slow rising of a flood. We're now at St Andrew's Church, a short drive from the Charles Booth Centre. Due to Charles's work, along with the work of the Quaker Seaborn Rowntree, son of Joseph Rowntree, the founder of the Rowntree Sweets we all know and love, poverty became a high-profile issue in the House of Commons and the House of Lords. This led to the passing of the Education Provision of Meals Act in 1906, which introduced free school meals for children 36 years after education had become compulsory.
In 1912, Charles resigned as chairman of the Alfred Booth Company in favour of his nephew. However, in 1915 he had returned to work due to the war. At the start of the war, the company had over 30 ships, 11 were requisitioned and 9 of them were sunk in enemy action. In 1916, Charles would die of a stroke and is buried here in St Andrew's Churchyard.
The turmoil of Charles's younger days could have been enough to turn him into a bitter and greedy man, parentless in a cutthroat world of commerce with a shipping company at his disposal. However, he took these life-changing events and, along with the influence of his religious upbringing and the devotion of his wife Mary, crafted them into a positive impact on the society he saw around him. His determination to uncover the truth about the poverty that plagued London and his dedication to publicising it meant that his impact would be felt nationally and still is today. His values of supporting the youngest and oldest in society via free school dinners and old age pensions have far outlived Charles and have transcended into our modern day society. And no matter how threatened these values may become, at least for now, we can say they are not just a thing of the past.